The sun was barely rising over the humble, unplastered brick houses when Daniel adjusted his faded cap and picked up his shovel. He was 27 years old, slim, with skin weathered by the sun and hands hardened from work. Every morning, he left his small home on the outskirts of the town of San Antonio del Monte, ready to earn his bread with dignity. His mother, Mrs. Rosa, always saw him off with a blessing, even though for years he had distanced himself from faith. "Take care, son, and ask the Virgin to be with you," she told him every day. Daniel would usually smile without replying. He had learned from a young age that life gave nothing for free. His father had died in a collapse at the same construction site where Daniel now worked. Since then, religion had seemed like an empty promise to him. The only thing he believed in was his own effort. That day, like many others, he was tasked with digging the foundations for a house being built on the edge of town. The ground was dry, filled with hard stones and dry roots. As he dug with firm blows, something unusual struck his shovel. A hollow sound, different from that of an ordinary stone. He bent down, carefully removed the dirt, and with his dust-covered hands found a small worm-eaten wooden box. The foreman, a rough man always in a hurry, shouted from the top of the scaffolding, "Daniel, don't stop. Keep working on the trench." But curiosity was stronger. Daniel carefully pulled the box out. It was sealed with rusty nails and wrapped in a cloth that, despite the years, still held a faint scent of incense. With some effort, he opened it and froze. Inside, on a white cloth embroidered with golden threads, was a small image of the Virgin Mary, carved from dark wood, with minute details that seemed impossible to make by hand. Her serene, gentle eyes seemed to look at him with compassion. As he touched it, a strange shiver ran through his body. It wasn't fear. It was something else. Something he hadn't felt since childhood. A mix of peace, nostalgia, and comfort. Without saying a word, he placed the image in his backpack and kept working. But something inside him had changed. That night, when he got home, he locked himself in his room, carefully cleaned the image, and placed it on a shelf that had been empty since his father died. His mother, upon seeing it, brought her hands to her chest and shed a tear. "That's the Virgin of Hope," she whispered. "Decades ago, they said an image like that disappeared during a war. The elders spoke of her as the protector of the town." Daniel said nothing, but that night he slept better than he had in many years. Days later, strange things began to happen. First, the owner of the construction site where Daniel worked offered him, without any apparent reason, a better-paid position as site supervisor. Then, a co-worker whom Daniel had helped months earlier, by lending him money he never expected to get back, showed up at his house to return double the amount. "I don't know why, but I felt I had to do it," the man said. But the most astonishing event occurred a week later. The neighbor's daughter, a little girl named Sophie, who had been born with walking difficulties, came to visit with her mother. While playing near the shelf where the image was placed, the girl tripped, fell, and got up by herself, without any help. She walked to her mother amid shouts of amazement. The neighbors said it was a miracle. Daniel didn't know what to think. The only thing he was sure of was that since he had found that image, everything in his life seemed to take a different course. Not in a magical way, but with a kind of light that hadn't been there before. The news spread through the town like wildfire. Daniel's house filled with people, elderly folks, mothers with sick children, desperate individuals. Everyone wanted to see the image. Some prayed, others cried, and others simply gazed at it in silence. At first, confused, Daniel decided to let everyone in. He didn't charge anything, didn't ask for anything. He simply let the Virgin do whatever she was meant to do. Then came the hardest test. One morning, returning from a job in a nearby town, he found his house in flames. The neighbors tried to put out the fire, but it was too late. Everything was burning: the furniture, the memories, and the shelf where the image stood. Daniel ran inside without thinking. Through the smoke and flames, he found the image lying intact among the ashes on the clay floor. He took it in his arms and came out coughing, tears and soot covering his face. Those present, who thought everything was lost, fell to their knees upon seeing the undamaged figure. It was as if the fire had respected it. From then on, Daniel's story crossed borders. Journalists, devotees, and skeptics arrived. He remained firm. He wasn't seeking fame, money, or recognition. He only wanted to share what he had received. He rejected offers to sell it, paid interviews, even a proposal from an international TV channel to turn his life into a series. But one day, something happened that transformed everything even more. A woman dressed in simple clothing came to his new home, a house the neighbors had all helped him build together. Her name was Isabel, and she had a tired but gentle face. She said she was the granddaughter of the person who, more than 70 years ago, had buried the image underground to protect it during the country's civil war. Her grandmother, sick and persecuted for her faith, had buried it in the hope that one day someone worthy would find it. "And that someone was you, Daniel," Isabel said, taking his hands. "My grandmother said the Virgin would come to the one who could see her with the eyes of the soul." Daniel didn't know what to say. He could only hug her. From that day on, he turned his home into a place of refuge, not a sanctuary with candles and glass cases, but a home for those who had nowhere else to go. He welcomed orphans, abandoned elderly people, and single mothers with no resources. He shared the little he had, and every time it seemed like resources were about to run out, some anonymous donation appeared. A neighbor arrived with food, or a new well-paid job offer came his way. The image of the Virgin remained on his shelf, simple, without luxury, but to all who saw it, it conveyed something more than faith. It radiated humanity, comfort, and hope. Years later, when Daniel was already an old man, he was interviewed by a young journalist who asked what the most important thing he had learned since finding the image was. Daniel looked out the window, where children were playing in the yard, and answered in a calm voice, "I learned that miracles are not always beams of light or impossible healings. Sometimes, the true miracle is when a heart opens, when someone who has suffered greatly chooses to love, when someone who has lost everything decides to share." The Virgin only reminded me that there is always something to give, even when we think we have nothing. The journalist moved, turned off the recorder, and thanked him. Daniel smiled, caressed the image on the shelf, and whispered, as he did every night, "Thank you for finding me."